Ladies and gentlemen, we have a cast over for you today. It's going to be Btyb88 as Terran against Alexhandr as Protoss. Alexhandr recently making waves as a newcomer. Not only has he joined the coffee crew relatively early into his time spent with the production, and with the project, with the community, but he's also been spreading the word of Todd. And we, of course, always appreciate that here. This map, or match, will be played on Proxima, but there are more matches to come afterwards. And we're going to be focusing a little bit more on an educational stance, right? Btyb88 obviously competing in some of the recent or Ascension moves. Yeah, I think he competed in the first one, but not the second one. Had to bow out because of an injury. We hate when players have injuries. You know, they got to take care of their wrists, although I think it was, yeah, it wasn't related to his wrist, but, you know, playing up the angle. I come from a Counter-Strike background for the most of my recent esports experience, since, you know, I don't really follow Remastered too much, since as an RTS, it's not very interesting to me. Starcraft 1 is not very interesting to me anymore. But when I am following, you know, players who have injuries, it's always related to the wrist. It's always that carpal tunnel. But, you know, actually, I think the Koreans are pretty good about avoiding that now. They've studied that. Anyhow, this match is indeed, like I said, on Proxima by Btyb88. It's a map that has not actually been played very recently, so maybe this will even give Btyb88 some ideas for updating or improving the map, since it has been a little bit since that has occurred. And we have a Stockade first from Ben. He's known as a Protoss player, obviously, so him off-racing here is probably in an attempt to learn the new method. He has played Terran against me as well on an earlier version of Death Spiral, actually. And I proxy hatched his ass. So that was amusing. But a potentially legitimate strategy, you know? When you're going up against Stockade first, something to note is that it's really quite difficult to avoid getting attacked by Mavericks and having your, or even Cyprians, and having your Worker Scout destroyed. Whereas obviously against Zerg, who go Quasrock, or just Zerg in general, because it does take a little bit longer for them to get their military out. At least with most of the build orders that we've seen so far. And against Protoss, who goes Zealot first, that is going to be a case where you can avoid that a little bit more. Also, the Mason obviously does have more HP in total, by about 15, I think. So, in that context, right, we do indeed have Ben allowing his worker to get tickled to death. And, you know, very, very labored reaction there as he drops his first Fulcrum, and he already has a Vestry out. I would say for his side, going Vestry so early, I mean, this is just a general truism about StarCraft. I'll even pause to make this point because I'm not sure what's going to happen when I switch over to Alexander's base. It might be much the same. He's got almost 300 gas already, so I don't know what's going on there. But when it comes to building a structure, when you're dropping a Fulcrum, right, that's obviously going to be money that you can't, like, you're not really getting anything out of it immediately. You have to wait for the build time. When you build an add-on, you have to think about yourself, like, can I actually use this add-on? And is it appropriate for me to use this add-on? Because if you start building clerics or shamans when you only have 3 Mavericks, I mean, at that point, you're going to be hard-pressed to survive against anything that Protoss has in the early stages of the game. Now, at this point, you're not being attacked, so it's not really that big of a deal. But I would maybe say that the Vestry timing is a little bit too early for him to use. And you saw there, it did take a good while before the clerics were even able to train because of his economy, right? He dropped the Fulcrum, and then he had to obviously queue up some workers for building some Masons. I would say, actually, Alexhandr on this side is cutting Scribes so that he can get Zealots out fast, which is not necessarily the most useful move for against Bio, although obviously with Ecclesiast they become a little bit better since you stop the micro potential against them for the most part. The Ecclesiast can obviously just close the distance anyway and do consistent damage to the opponents, plus keeping your Zealots alive on the front line. But you don't want to be, you know, doing that with, with Scribes. He did lose this one over here. So for a second there, he was at 11 Scribes. Now he's at 12, by the way. That's obviously he's obviously at a significant economic deficit already, particularly since a lot of his workers are not harvesting minerals. Instead, 3 of them harvesting gas without really being able to use it. Like, he has started to build Ecclesiasts, which are, you know, fairly gas intensive. And there's even an anchor being put down, which is pretty good proactive play by Ben. So, so far, I would say the advantage is definitely in his favor. I mean, he's got a Goliath coming out. It's going to be a while before that Goliath actually makes it there. And, of course, Alexhandr, with the anchor sighted, should be able to come in here and start doing something. Now, I don't think that he can clean all of this up unless there's just not really much micro. This is really good cleric body blocking there. But the Ecclesiast focusing down, the fact that the Zealots got that attack in on the Mason constructing the anchor, that was a big deal. I think maybe it was even... That might have even been the really wounded worker that was still left alive after the scout that only had 20 HP or whatever. If that's the case, that's actually obviously, like, you know, okay, you're a little bit daring, but I guess it would have been healed up anyway by it would have been healed up by the cleric to begin with, so it probably was full HP. That's just something that maybe if he had healed the Mason while it was repairing, that would have been the micro thing that he could have used to save himself. But yeah, this is not an optimal set. I mean, 400 gas again. Like, there's so much money that's not being spent here by Alexhandr. So this is definitely like you can play against this relatively easily. There's no Dracodins even, right? So losing the cleric does hurt there. There is another one over there. It's not joining the rally. The force over here is now falling back, which is a little bit comical. But again, versus something like that, you do want Dracodins. And he's got a Warden because he's fearing drops. Because at this point, you know, Ben could very easily have that. He could also expand. It looks like that's what he's going to do, dropping a treasury down, which makes a lot of sense. And adding a second fulcrum here, I think based on his income, he can go ahead and build more Goliaths and transition into that Goliath-Cleric combo. With maybe some Cyprians for backup or something, considering it's still a very gateway-heavy army that isn't including a lot of Dracodins. So, yeah, at this stage, it's probably quite useful for that. The other thing he could do, of course, is, I mean, he's posturing very aggressively here, which I think it does work against Zealot Ecclesiast, specifically because there's not really much burst damage, right? The Ecclesiasts aren't going to do a lot of damage there. So if he can thin the front line a little bit, or pick off some of the more gas-intensive, expensive units, then that's a pretty good deal. But he moved out with only a single cleric. And again, because of the capacity for the Ecclesiasts to regenerate shields on the Zealots, this is an overstep in terms of the micro level, right? And there's no anchor up here for defense, or down here for defense to hold the choke. So this might just be a game-ending push very, very soon here. I can't really see how he could stay alive for too long. He's not really focusing down the wounded Zealots either, so... And now he's, you know, isolating Goliaths, you know, miss-microing, finishes the treasury, but it's not much there. Is going to start getting picked off or tickled. And again, yeah, it's just a matter of... Versus this comp, Ecclesiasts are very, very good because you don't really have the, you know, spread damage, right? This is where you would want to add Cyprians. Pretty good surround there from Alexhandr. Obviously, again, there's so many units here that could be focused down but aren't being focused down, and that's just going to be GG, I think, based on the fact that he's... When you're on top of Terran production, it's so hard to come back there, so... yeah, overstepping his bounds. As Terran, you really don't want to be pushing out with just a less than a control group of units. You want, like, 2 control groups of units, I would hazard a guess. And even then, you might be in you know, up shit's creek without a paddle, as they say, if you're not careful with the way that your unit movement is. So I would 100% encourage Terran players to maybe get that, you know, cautious scouting. You can send one stimmed Maverick out. It doesn't cost very much minerals or time. You can, you know, stem a Maverick, go to the middle of the map, see what's going on. You can scout the extremities as well, go around the world, see if they have a natural. Because again, economically speaking, if Ben sits in his base and scouts instead with, you know, confirming the position of Alexander's army, it doesn't really matter what Alexhandr does, because obviously Ben can drop 1 or 2 anchors, even with 150 minerals as they are in the current update. Like, that's not a huge expenditure, considering you have such an economic advantage. You've got more workers because Alexhandr was sloppy with his macro. You've got an expansion up, and Alexhandr has nothing like that because he's just been pumping units. I didn't get a chance to check his base, but I suppose in this context, we are mostly giving feedback for the loser in this particular match. I will see what I can do to watch back some of the other matches or the future matches that we're going to cast in just a second and talk a little bit about that. Again, this is more of an educational type thing as opposed to strictly entertainment. But in that context, yeah, I would say there's a lot of room for you to stabilize at various points there. I think with the double fulcrum, you could have gone Scrapyard into Matador, would have helped massively because you're forcing the Zealots to lose all of, you know, their 1 armor, admittedly, but lose their armor to engage with you. Obviously, it does work pretty well at dealing, again, crowd control damage, and the Matadors have decent beef themselves, which you can use clerics to heal and sustain. So that would have been something that you could... It's weird to say transition because it's just an add-on, but that would have been something you could have added to your repertoire. Again, it would have interrupted some unit production, so that's why you don't lose all of your units, because it's not that Protoss can remax their army faster than Terrans can at this stage of the game, at least with this particular map this particular match where Alexhandr obviously had low numbers of production structures. But I think in that context, you know, we're looking at the way that Ben moved his units around and built some structures and stuff. He had 2 fulcrums and he had a barracks, and the barracks had a vestry. So you're competing between, like, do I get, you know, any of the default units that I have available, or do I get some of the units from the vestry? Shamans are too expensive and not really suitable for that. They're more like crowd control, right? Like, oh, I'm gonna, you're gonna attack me with like splash from like an idol or something, and I'm going to, replenish all of my forces nearby with that. And obviously, they're also good at like, providing detection when they're deployed and all that stuff. So, anyway, the thing I'm getting at here is what we wanted to see out of that engagement has probably been taking his time a little bit more, not jumping the gun. I know he likes to try to close games in the early stages of the game. At least he's told me that he likes to. He's not necessarily super good at the macro, so he does feel this pressure to just end the game somewhat soon and be somewhat aggressive, or at least he wants to be aggressive in general. That's like a playstyle he wants. If that's your playstyle, I'm not saying it's impossible to do that as Terran, but it does require a pretty good understanding of the race, and I think it does also require Starpad, or at the very least, it requires like a different opener than that. And you're competing with your interests to end early or to be super aggressive in the early game if you're also expanding. That's another thing to keep in mind. I thought the expansion timing was fine, but it's just he decided to go across the map, or try to go across the map, with an army that, I won't say it's a hard counter, but like, again, you need really good focus fire and maintaining, that focus with Goliaths to burst down units through the Ecclesiast heal. And once you clear the front line, then, assuming your clerics are still alive, which ideally are actually going to be on the behind the Goliaths, because then the Ecclesiasts have to step into really heavy, aggro territory in order to deal any damage to them. That's a situation where you might be able to do something significant as far as keeping your Goliaths alive. But he went with one cleric. It got focused down relatively early, so he lost all of his sustain, and then he wasn't able to burst down more than a single zealot with the army that he had. He had no crowd control, no Horakans from the stockade, and certainly no Cyprians. Either one of those would have been great additions. Obviously, in the later stages of the game, if he sticks with that gateway, melee-focused army, infantry-focused army from the Protoss side, you can go Matadors, etc. On the side of Alexhandr, yeah, had way too much gas at all stages of the game. Not sure what to say about that one. That's something that has to be categorized at a later stage. I think if you're floating that much gas, I mean, you just pull the workers off gas for now. Spend your bank, unless you're specifically thinking, oh, I want, sequestered icon or something like that, maybe an embassy. But again, that's a separate remark. So let's get into match number 2. All right, ladies and gentlemen, back with another matchup between these two players, Btyb88 and Alexhandr. Once again, a TVP, and this time we are on Repulsion, a map that is in the map pool. Let's see here. Is this the updated version? Yes, it looks like it is. So we'll be able to see a first game on the updated Repulsion, which is worthwhile in general, right? Something of note. That's not quite the color for Ben, but I appreciate the work that he's doing there. Lemon is, that's a nice color on Protoss, I'll tell you that much. So it looks like Alexhandr wants to practice the other races, not just be playing Zerg all the time, which is funny because I think he told me once that he used to play Terran in StarCraft 1, but all of the insane micro and chores and stuff he had to do were too much for him or something. And then, so he played Zerg. And he always talks about how Protoss are evil and scum and terrible people and etc. Meanwhile, oh, maybe this is an error. Maybe the replay's bugged or something. That's weird. Anyhow, we're going to jump right in here and see what's going on. I was told who won what match, I think, but I don't remember. Which is good, because I would prefer to just sort of see how it goes organically. One thing that is interesting to note, this map is by Btyb88, by the way. I forgot to mention that earlier. This map and the previous map are by Btyb88, and our next match is also on Repulsion. So stay tuned for some Vikening happening. And I will once again mention that I do indeed have Super Coffee, and it has nothing to do with the link in the bottom right-hand corner of the screen. However, I did already drink it, so instead I'll be drinking some water during this sponsored pause. I do think that with a Cyprian first opener, Ben's going to have a little bit of a harder time actually catching the Scribe, something that you can do, especially, the Starpad opener gets scouted as well. That's awkward. Of course, Ben probably would have wanted maybe a Maverick. You stim the Maverick, you chase the Scribe, maybe force them back a little bit sooner, right? You go straight into the ramp a little bit faster. That's something that he found out on Proxima. And as you can see, the Scribe is staying alive a fair bit longer here. So a second pylon immediately going down by the Nexus. I don't think you have to immediately start working on defenses. You can just use Drakodins for this, and you might even want to go into Cenotaph Hierophant if it's going to be mass wraiths or something, but you don't know that it's going to be mass wraiths. You might be thinking, oh, it's just a drop. And if you commit yourself to a defense in the early stages of the game, that's a lot of money that you're putting down without necessarily getting guaranteed value. The reason why you want defenses, static defenses, in your resource line when you're dealing with something like harassment, drops, wraith play, whatever. That sort of thing is important By the way, if you rally onto an enemy unit, they get an attack order. So that might help you get that first bit of damage done. But you can see here the Draken is going to mop the floor with this Mason just super easily. There you go. You get the range buff from the cliff advantage there. But yeah, the reason why you would want static defense is because you want to move your army somewhere else. If you have your army in your base already, then you don't need the static defense because you have mobile defense, you have non-static defense and dynamic defense. A second warden, also super early Camille. This is 300 resources, guys. That could be 3 zealots. That could be 2 Drakenons when you mine a little bit of extra gas. That could be however many workers. That's 100 minerals away from expanding. You know, there's a lot of money put into this that probably didn't need to be put into this. So it's going to be Antseal first. That's an interesting option. Maybe combined with a Trojan, you could imagine the Antseal and the Trojan working together to drop off, you know, a hit squad and then defend them against the Warden and the Drakenon. But the double Drakenon, since you have double warded, I guess you might as well go ahead and scout across the map. That makes sense. But yeah, I do have to, you know, I think I did the same thing when Ben was building like 6 Wardens in his base and stuff back on the, you know, Iceberg, I think was the match. I don't remember who he was playing against. Might have been Shambler or Mesk or somebody. But he built a ton of static defense. And it's just, like, it's okay if you're trying to hold down an area and you already have the money to spare. The Wraith is even going to go ahead and scout those out, so he'll see it on the minimap, even if his screen doesn't belie that he actually saw them. Oh, I think he's figured it out. Yeah, he's going to pull the Wraith back just to maybe confirm what those are. The Antseal's over here in a funny, quirky spot. So that's pretty funny. And the Embassy does indeed make the Scribes. So getting a little bit of information from his opponent here. Good manner. Good manner. So, yeah, confirming the position of the Drakenon. I don't think he was paying attention here, but Alexhandr could have spotted the fact that it was Wraiths. Not that, again, it really matters. He's got 2 Wardens. He's fully insulated from any sort of damage. The problem is, look at all the Cyprians. The fact is, you can't break this anymore as Terran, especially when the Antseal pops down to shield against the Drakenon. So that Zealot is almost certainly going to be taken care of. There is a bug with Antseals lately where they start to defend. If the projectiles go to max range, they have no target. Therefore, you the Antseal protects against those shots from nothing. Like, that's really stupid. So I'm gonna have to figure out how to safeguard against that. But again, I think what you would have seen again is maybe having 2 more Drakenons, right, instead of waiting for them this rotation. Or maybe your Embassy comes out faster and then you build Scribes faster, right, because you got your extra production queue. There's still no quarry over here for Ben, which isn't necessarily a point of criticism. Like, if you're spending all your money, you're keeping your money low, then maybe you don't need it. I do think that at some point you would want to go for it, but, you know, he went star pad early. That's fairly gas intensive. He's got a lot of Cyprians. He's moving across the map. Like, it's more than possible to maybe close this game out relatively early, or at the very least get a significant advantage, after which point, okay, I'm at reasonable saturation of my main base. I'm going to drop a quarry and then go for an expansion, something like that. That could very well be something that occurs. Now, this is a really good spot here to station a bunch of Drakenons, so that's good heads-up play there, using the cliff advantage to his advantage. And the Zealot is guarding the bridge. So he's well insulated again from this sort of angle. If there's a Trojan on the way, which I believe there is, yeah, it's more than halfway done, he can start elevatoring units over here, which is the only weakness that he has. And if he was able to drop some gas, which he has 300 of as he gets a 3rd gateway, he could get a witness and then station it over here, or just generally rally it this way and then see all of this here. And then maybe he would be a little bit more aware of the potential for that sort of play. Now, this is going to rally straight over there, so it's not going to be spotted by any of the Protoss units. This is, I'm guessing this is what happens. I'm guessing he gets elevated in and gets absolutely bamboozled. He does have a lot of Drakenons over here, right? He's got 6 Drakenons. And similar to the Vestry timing of the previous matchup, the previous map, you could say. Oh, this is dirty. Yeah, pulling the Drakenons away, right? And then he's going to try to elevate her in. That's pretty good. Silly pathing. Oh, he actually depowers it, so that's interesting. That's Artosis piling. But the 3rd gateway, he's got the 3rd gateway without being able to actually use all 3 of them at the same time, right? So that's the mineral stuff, right? So he does end up redoubling his efforts with multiple pylons. That does make some sense. He's going to go ahead and unload the Cyprians over here. And, you know, now the Drakenons aren't re-establishing their post, at which point they might have been able to answer something here, right? The Antseal can, of course, protect these units from the burst. The Antseal is just about out of energy now and doesn't get focused down. So, yeah, you've already lost a lot of shields on units. You've lost some hull damage. You have some Wardens being set up, but they're a long ways away from being done. And your Zealots are nowhere to be seen because they were scouting out, thinking maybe there was another position somewhere. So this actually isn't the end of the world, because you could pull workers to deal with this, but the Wraith's coming back in for the... You could argue maybe it's the killing blow here, especially when there's more units that could have been elevated over at some point if Ben had the APM to spare. Losing all of those, at this point, you know, it's going to take a while for him to chew through, and you've got 700 minerals. You never reordered units out of your gateway. I think this could have been stabilized, considering there's not really much here, and you could have also recovered the zealots at any point, or maybe just like checked out what was going on over here, but of course that didn't end up being necessary. And yeah, at this point it's too late. You start ordering units as your second, safety pylon ends up going down. So yeah, I think, oh, okay, I see he canceled his units, he says. Well, either way, that's a situation where it could have been better, right? And the SimCity, again, I don't think you can point to the 300 empty minerals in the Wardens that didn't do anything. I mean, they zoned out the Wraiths, but didn't really do anything of note. I don't think you can point to that as, oh yeah, this is obviously the biggest problem here and was a huge issue. But yeah, at no point, like, you don't even try to put a pylon down here. I mean, I think maybe he already conceded the match in his head. So he gets one more Cyprian for good measure. He's only got a single Cyprian to deal with. He can go ahead and try to pick it up, try to save the pylon. I mean, even if it warps in, it's almost dead, so losing so many workers, etc., etc. Yeah, it's not gonna do the trick, I don't think. And there's of course more units on the way, so that'll close the game out. I think not restationing the Drakodins over here and then like being in that awkward spot where your own base area is being used against you. If the Wraiths had joined the fight, it would have been even more one-sided, because then the Drakodins would have like not even attacked the Cyprians while they were kiting backwards and stuff, or not all of them would have. Although actually saying that, I'm not sure if that's the case, because obviously something that could have been done is that some of those Drakodins weren't able to attack anyway during the stutter step. So maybe that would have increased the damage that the Drakodins were able to deal. Either way, it was a really bad situation for the positioning of his Drakodins. At that point, he couldn't really fight back against the onslaught of Terra and Bio. So, cheeky plays, and, unwittingly perhaps, the Trojan being the primary thing here, right? That was the only thing that realistically helped him out there, which is really funny, really quite interesting. So, like, that was the only way into the base that wasn't going to get dealt with by the cliff advantage units. So that's pretty neat. And, also, I guess it's kind of clever that since he had the embassy, he can afford to sacrifice workers a little bit more frequently than your average Protoss player might be able to in this situation. But he lost that. I mean, this game has been over for a while now. It's just, he's got a single simulacrum. He's going to tickle that Wraith to death. Or maybe not. Got a Legion Arrow. That's pretty important. Getting value. Dude, look at that. Splitting his sim. That's value. In order to, I mean, like, again, since this game is over, it's hard to criticize Ben back at home. He could have, again, built that quarry for a third production queue since he built one on the treasury. He has got all these structures building. That's fine. Yeah, not really a big deal there. Anseal protecting units again. GG LOL, I tried. And that's going to go ahead and close out the replay. So I think what we learned there is, again, if you're going to build a production structure, it's a good idea to add production to your army or to your repertoire, but make sure you have the economy to support it. It's a good idea to build static defense, but only when your army is going to be moving out. I would have maybe been a little bit more understanding of the Warden timing if it came after your second round of Drakodins. If you move out with 4 Drakodins, or you move out with the first 2 Drakodins while 2 more are just about done, and you poke around and see what's going on, you get there a lot sooner because you're not spending 300 minerals on Wardens. You can start to maybe apply some pressure, or at the very least, you keep Ben's attention at home for a little bit longer. Like, think about it like this. If he's going Starpad, he's putting resources into units which are either utilitarian in the Anseal department, which does translate in some ways, because of the defensibility, to the capacity for a frontal attack. But in general, they are going to be a little bit utilitarian, where they can't attack you directly. They are a force multiplier more than anything. There's the Wraith, which can't really do anything to Drakodins specifically, right? They have to be in critical numbers to do anything to Drakodins. So that's going to be... There's a timer on how long it will take for that to really hit anything, and it's a long way away. Or they're going for transports, which, again, they allow you to unlock new and interesting strategies with the other units that you make, but he's basically locked into just bio. So when you know that your opponent is locked into just bio because he's gone for a star pad, it's going to be a while before he gets a fulcrum. Again, he could go 1-1-1 or whatever, but that has not yet been done. you kind of know, okay, at least for the early stages of the game, he's only got like 1 or 2 Wraiths at his disposal, or 1 Anseal with a couple Cyprians for defensive purposes, because the Cyprians aren't going to get across the map that fast. Or he's got, a Trojan to try to do some quick drop on me. So in that sense, you can actually go with 2 Dracodons and maybe do some damage, or at least force his units to be, stuck at home. And now suddenly with that pressure, you're applying a lot better in general. And then, you look at that and you think to yourself like, okay, let's check that out. Let's see how that goes. Meanwhile, the other angle is, again, if you're delaying yourself the same way that he's kind of delaying himself from reaching a critical mass army in that context, because he delayed it by making Starpad, which is like indirect strength in many ways, or harassment, like more scouting, whatever. You're delaying your army by getting defenses that only work if he actually does the one thing, like transport drop or Wraith harass or something. So in that context, I would just say that's probably the biggest thing. And then, yeah, the third gateway, when you had no money to even operate 2 gateways at a time, is ambitious. It's the right move, but it's too soon. It's similar to the Vestry timing from the first match. So we're jumping to the third match, see what else we can learn before we close this one out. But yeah, hopefully some interesting lessons to be taken to improve these players' play should they go for similar races in the future. Or just in general, I mean, a lot of this stuff is translatable across all the races, right? It's match 3 out of 3. Btyb88 is now Protoss, and Alexhandr is now Zerg. Well, apparently he intended to be Protoss, but instead they'll be playing their main races to close us out on Repulsion. The new Repulsion we didn't really get to see too much of, but obviously we have a new middle for you to fight around and whatnot. Obviously new bases and whatnot. We have a high ground 3rd now. We have still the high ground 4th, but like the flow in between is a little bit different. And the gas intense bases over here to the left are no longer on the low ground. They are also now on the high ground. So high ground city. Pretty much every base is on the high ground now. There's, what, 3 exceptions technically per player. Natural, this potential 3rd option, and then this in the middle. Bad started build already. Oh, he means that his build order has been bad, apparently. He batted himself. Well, that's okay. He's scouting out with his worker, scouting it around the same time. Scout times are a little bit different. I think some of the older heads, like Ben, in fact, might be a little bit on the like paranoid side, where they scout super early because they're really worried about what might be happening, because they're kind of conditioned in their head to like the old stages of the game where it was a lot faster and you could get, like games could end in like 5 minutes. Now, I think even the really one-sided matches and, maybe, I don't know, something like 8-9 minutes in, and it takes a little bit longer for those one-sided matches to occur, where somebody makes a critical mistake and then loses a bunch of stuff as a result. But meanwhile, it still is reasonable for the, in this particular case, for the Zork's opener. I mean, for Zerg specifically, you don't really know what they're going to be going for, right? So a Zork's first match is not a bad play. Please order that worker. Thank you. It's going to be a Larvosk afterwards. And, I mean, this is basically Shambler's build, right? He's even got the Burrowed Worker, in the same capacity. Now, getting an Ecclesiast against this is not a bad shout. You can obviously sustain yourself or your workers if it's Gorgorkors. However, if it's not Gorgorkors, in that particular context, then that could be its own interesting position. He's actually going for a Kagran over here. This is where you can maybe criticize the SimCity a little bit. If you were intending to take the ramp, you build your Kagran that turns into a Larvosk a little bit closer, so that this Kagran, which turns into static defense presumably, is a little bit closer. I'm not even sure if you want to build a Circuit in this context. Again, this is sort of like the Wardens, right? It's unforced. You haven't scouted out like what he's going for. You just, maybe you saw the second gateway, maybe you didn't, but it's a gateway opener. When do you expect something, right? At this point, you have no units, but you have a Circuit. Well, my Zealots, if I'm Protoss, I can just walk my Zealots past the Circuit, and then you can do nothing. So, yeah, and you're also chasing this one worker with 2 workers, which is really bad for your efficiency. Zerg, in particular, need a ton of workers. And you're even workers with the Protoss right now, but you have all this larva that you can't use because you're money, and part of it is undoubtedly related to that. So I know he's probably trying to get rid of the Scout before the Gorgorkor actually hatches, so that he doesn't give up the game that he's going Gorgorkor. Meanwhile, I think he's using this as a scout, but I'm actually not. Oh, he's trying to find out where the scribe is, I think. Yeah, and then he figured it out. Well, the Gorgorkor has indeed... Oh, there's a pylon over there. The Gorgorkor has indeed hatched. This is not a bad play. Obviously, in the future, when we revise the Protoss macro, the approach that they take, this will not be possible anymore in the same capacity. But it does scout him out. I mean, I don't think Ben noticed, but it does reveal that some flyers left the base, if he's following the minimap. And so, yeah, he's going to go ahead and get some more Ecclesiasts. Another pylon. He's got a Warden for some coverage, sort of force the Gorgon cores back to the right-hand side where your Ecclesiasts can isolate them. And again, your Ecclesiasts will keep your workers alive. Meanwhile, Ben doing a very good job keeping his Scribe alive. And again, forcing Alexhandr to tickle him as best as possible. Now, I think this is going to be it, since at this stage, there's an attack on the front line. The Ecclesia staying alive a little bit longer than they should have. Obviously, plenty of survivability here, and not great focus fire. So he is going to lose a couple of Ecclesiasts, but the Gorgon cores are also dead. So that's always more cost efficient for the Protoss. Meanwhile, the Circuit does claim the life of the Scribe before anything can get warped in back here, which is a cheeky play that he might be able to do. By the way, if you're interested in what the revision to the Protoss macro methodology is going to be, that is going to be discussed in a forthcoming episode of Prototype that I will be recording after this. And there are loads of coffee questions this time around, so I'm happy about that, because it means I get to engage with the community, the community, the coffee community. And don't be immune to coffee, by the way. That sounds horrible. But we do have more Zealots, more Protoss coming out. Still just on 2 gateways, which is more than enough for now. A 3rd gateway going down. Again, where's the money? Doesn't have these units blinking. So when these are blinking and you still have more money, it's like if you have a stockade and you queue 3 Mavericks while it's training something else, that's enough for another stockade. So just build another stockade, right? That's sort of like the logic. This Hatrosk is going to get canceled because he only has 1 single Gorgon core, and he's building another one. But again, he only has static defense. If these were not static defense and they were instead workers on the mineral line, he probably has money to get, additional military units. Maybe he builds a Hydrox so that he can build more conventional military. Maybe he gets some Lakizilisks to ward off this ground-based army, especially considering, 5 Ecclesias dealing with 2 Gorgon cores with minimal micro or minimal effective micro and incurring equivalent losses. That's really bad for the Gorgon core cost efficiency. And, misplaced Nexus. It's all right, Ben. You'll figure that out eventually. Yeah, at this point, you can just charge in with the Zealots. Of course, the Ecclesiasts are going to have to split their attention a little bit. Interesting to not just run by, but again, there's 3 circuits at this point. So, yeah, the Ecclesiasts are going to get focused down a little bit faster now that there's 3 Gorgon cores. So this didn't really accomplish too much. There's another Ecclesiast up there attacking the circuit. So, again, faulty micro. Lakizalus comes in. Probably could have just stationed around and tried to contain and sent more units out. Drakidins are better at bursting down the Gorgon cores. Ecclesiasts are better at sustaining against them. So that's sort of like the thing that you can think about. But yeah, there goes some of the Zealots. Cut down by the flying Ultralisks, as they were once called by, I think my name is Lol. I don't remember. At least he's keeping tabs on them. He could have even run that Zealot, to the other direction and keep... and that doesn't sound as useless as it really is, because if your Zealots walk this way and the Gorgon cores ignore them, you can just walk back into the mineral line over here and start tickling them, right? So that's another thing you can do. These Gorgon cores are full HP. The Drakidins are out. So in addition to these Ecclesiasts, that is going to be a very painful realization. Good damage happening. Okay, he gets 1 Scribe. But again, one of his Gorgon cores is very bruised. The other one is, 75% HP. More Drakidins in the queue. And a Lakizalisk drop is indeed going to try to occur here, I think. Well, it's hard to tell. I guess they're just being rallied. There's the Ovaleth, but it's not doing anything yet. So. I think I read something about a Lakizalisk drop during this, the wind down of this game. But again, praise be to my late night memory, because, I just sort of skim stuff. And I remember some details. But in this case, I'm deliberately trying to not remember every single thing. The base being done sooner for the Protoss is always a grim sign for Zerg, but he can, of course, remax it or max up his larva into Droleths a little bit faster than the Protoss can, since there's no embassy yet. In fact, an embassy is something you want to watch out for, because it significantly diminishes the effectiveness of Lakizalisks. He's going to spot the Lakizalisks. That's going to be useful information to confirm that there's more than just Gorgon cores on the field. Speaking of, there's a Lakizalus tickling his pylon, which is still alive somehow. I don't know how much vision this has been giving him this whole time, but, I don't think it's been giving him any vision on the worker line. But in theory, that gives you a lot of information, because there's a lot of Droleths. Okay, there's not much army. Versus, there's no Droleths or half Droleths or whatever. Okay, there's probably more of a focus on military, and then, because, you only have so much larva. But in this particular case, at this level, that might be even a misnomer, considering Alexhandr has a lot of of money and a lot of larvae lying around, and he's not really doing anything with it yet. I'm not that he's not doing anything, but he's could use some improvement there. So here comes the Lekizalisk drop. Again, you know, stationing a Zealot with an Ecclesiast or whatever over it kind of softens the blow, but there's neither of those options. Well, the Ecclesiast is here. No Zealots, though. See how long the reaction time is. Really has to pull the workers immediately. Losing 3 of them already. And he is safe. You know, if the Lekizalisk steps further, he's going to get shot by Wardens. Embassy is here, but isn't mining gas from his natural, so he's 4 gas away. 1 gas return away. In fact, do any of these scribes have gas? That one probably would have done it, actually. So this is going to be very annoying for a prolonged period of time where now he has to resaturate that base and etc. But honestly, even though that did way more damage than it should, and some of it is due to the lack of, you could say, what would you say about this? The low reaction time, I guess, in general. He's still not really ahead, per se. He is stretched ahead in worker count, but his distribution is a little bit lacking, and he obviously isn't mining gas from his natural either. Is fully saturated in gas over here, but not very saturated in his mineral line over there. Where are all of his workers, in fact? Because it looks like he's not very well saturated in his main. Meanwhile, walking straight on through, just get absolutely destroyed. Clumping up against the Lekizalisks, even after the Lekizalisks have started to shred your units, is a bold choice, but he can use the dying Ecclesiast to fall back. And again, you know, where's the witness at? He's starting to get it now, surely, yep. So, that's okay. 1,200 minerals, by the way. Plenty of money. Third base going down for Alexhandr. I did notice that earlier, but didn't mention it. Hydrock Den. So, yeah, at this point, you probably wanted to get the Hydrock Den when you got your natural set up. You got loads of mineral income. Not as much gas income since you're not mining gas from your natural. Could obviously build some more workers as well. But the key here is Hydrock Den for a variety of other reasons. Now, he's built a lot of Ovoleths. Doesn't he have like 2 or 3 Ovoleths? Maybe not. Maybe he's only getting a second one right now. I don't know if he's going for a double Lekizalisk drop or if he's going to go grab a Kagrant or something that he... Well, no. I guess he mutated all of his Kagrants. I was going to say he could maybe drop that in the back line, turn it into a Circuith as a ticking time bomb. This is pretty good for holding the choke if they come down the bridge. Of course, there is a ramp over in that side, which I'm not sure that he's aware of, but he can always send some Lekizalisks that way separately. And the Protoss, once again, have, you know, poked their heads out just to see what's going on. A third base fomenting for Ben as soon as he remembers that his scribe is over there. He's got the money to do it, and getting up to a 5th gateway. So, sticking to the gateway-only strategy, the Witness will go ahead and reveal the Lekizalisks. So this is a point where, again, lots of kill pressure, right? There's 2 circuits at the natural. You can destroy that. There's not really that many units coming in. You know, there's some Hydras and some Iziricors, but they are less about frontal fire in that context. And again, he can just walk in and either kill this high ground base or focus down the natural. Either one is going to be effective. Not doing the best in terms of general micro, but the Ecclesiast dying do allow the Zealots to close the gap a little bit faster, which does mean that those Lekizalisks are not long for this world. And the Witness revealing the Lekizalisk there is great. So that's a lot of gas. That's what, I want to say it's 500 times 75, or 5 times 75, rather. So that's a decent amount of gas already lost there. So in that particular context, down over 400 gas, you are looking at more frontal engagement. But again, the Ecclesiast not being here is a pretty big deal. Now you're just dealing with Dracodins versus Hydras. Focusing down the Iziricor means that the Hydras get so, like, basically carte blanche to deal with that. If he was really Gigabrain, he would have moved the Ovoleth over to snipe the Witness. But it doesn't end up happening. Reinforced Hydras are going to go ahead and clean up these Dracodins. And again, 5 gateways. You know, there's a bunch of Zealots coming down. They do need to wait and sync up with some more units. How do you keep misplacing that? And there's nothing else in production, so both players floating over 1,000 minerals. And Ben has a little bit of a lead in that, right? He's close to 2,000 minerals. He's got half a K gas. Lots of lack of mining over here, so this base has been a net negative so far. But of course, it's an investment into the future. And actually, these Zealots could just charge up here and start tickling and force the Hydras to maybe engage up the ramp. Of course, he's going to have vision and all that, but it's still somewhat deadly. But of course, it also makes sense to wait, right? So it's not like this is not a mistake that Ben is making. He doesn't even know that this base exists yet, I think. Maybe the Witness spotted the Kagra. Not sure about that. Kagra, of course, being my newfangled term for creep. Loads of money just got spent by Alexhandr, so he must be ordering a ton of Iziricors and Hydras. Indeed. Has a couple idle workers. Could, of course, he's going for a Larvask back at home over here, or back at the third base. He's got a Larvask in each base, which is kind of clever. Or Maybe not clever. It's interesting and thematic, but it's not what I would necessarily expect, so it's kind of funny. This base not yet being set up. I did see some more production. Grand Libraries, okay. So not a bad idea. If you go Ecclesiast Amaranth, they're basically unkillable without a significant amount of burst. So that's something that you could obviously do since you have so much gas in the tank. Could also be going for Cantavis. But at this point, I think, you know, again, this really comes down to Alexhandr and what he wants to do, but he should be able to overwhelm this force, particularly with the high ground circuit and stuff, right? So not bad there, getting a little bit of hull damage on the Zealots. Some more Dracodons are not necessarily going to make the difference here, but 5 more might. And there it goes. The Hydra with the Ovileth sighting, with the patrols, takes out the Witness, and there is no other Witness available to restock. That's something that DF showed us in Ascension 2, how powerful it was to just have Witnesses all over the map. Against Zerg, you know, you build one Spraith colony with the patrols, with the Ovileths, okay, that kind of gates heavily where the Witnesses can go, but you can still blanket the map in terms of looking for move-outs, right? So that's something that you can definitely be doing. And heads up for Alexhandr to be patrolling back and forth, but now he's on 3 bases. His opponent is going for an engram and a fleet beacon at the 3rd, which is very interesting because obviously this is theoretically his most vulnerable base. It's the most out of the way of his rally points. Is going to be Cantavis. Does he have an envoy? I don't see an envoy, so it won't be a storm drop just yet. But it's possible. Another Witness has made it to the front line to spot. I think Mess called them Godzilla or something. He's Aristoletes. Yeah, this is going to get messy. The Kislests are going to borrow and force this position very far back, even though he has detection. But there's actually no response just yet. He's going to pull back a little bit. Just going to try to do as much damage to thin the herd. But you can see they're all just falling from the crowd control and the Hydras. Does he have enough forces back at home? I mean, he's rally pointing them all, so he's going to start withdrawing them. And the Witness is going to, you know, remain here, which is not a bad idea, because it will detect whether or not the army has fallen back. And if they haven't, if you don't see them return, you can be pretty sure that they're attacking you. Atreus is on the way. Where did that Cantavis go? It's over here on the front. Not a bad idea. And doesn't yet have the money to afford an Empyrean, but should be coming up on the resources, unless he's going for a Solarian instead. No, he's spending his money elsewhere. So he's got the fleet beacon, but he's not using it just yet. Pretty good spot for the Dracodon. You could imagine some engrams over here would really catch this army off guard too. Instantaneous Storm. More of a zoning tool. He can do another one though. That's not a bad one. But again, maybe expecting more of an action. There is a Witness over here to detect the Kislests, one of which is just sort of buddying up. Yeah, the Storm target selection is a little bit awkward. And now the Cantavis will be focused down. But the engram is going to go ahead and do numbers on the Hydras. He's actually forcing his way into the natural territory. More units are on the way. There's plenty more to clean this up. And again, this is where you can see Ben on the defensive. He's queuing up more units. His camera is closer to his main base. Yeah, he's going to lose some scribes, but is it really going to be the end of the world? He's going to lose a scribe and maybe a Dracodon. There you go, from that particular exchange. And now the rest of the units are going to go ahead and hightail it on out of there. Keeping the Hydra there to scout that base is not a bad move. And yeah, we just once again have an Iral Iris. Okay, so he finally spent his gas. He finally spent his gas, boys. Finally spent his money. It's going to be Solarians. When you hit Tier 2 as Zerg, Vithrilisks become an option. You can obviously go for the Gorgel Swamp there from the Hydrockton. Burrowing fine. Decreases the chance of it being intercepted by something incidental. Ben keeping his money low. Alexhandr not quite at this stage. Maybe doesn't have the larva production. I'm going to go for another base in the bottom right. Maybe another base over here, too. I just saw him. When I see people's screen positions move in those directions, I just assume they're sending workers out to expand, and indeed that does seem to be the case. Second Solarian on the way. Hydra over here to burrow. You can actually shift Q burrow, just like siege mode. However, if you interrupt the command, it will immediately process. So we have not yet fixed that particular bug in Blizzard's flow control, but in theory it would be possible now, I think. I have to ask Week about that. Maybe he'll watch this and tell me. I'm sure he will watch this since it's games on his updated version of Repulsion. Come on now. He's got to watch it. I guess that first game probably didn't give him too many ideas for improving Proxima since it was so fast, but this one might be a nice little stress test there. I will say, in general, the thirds feel a lot more defensible. In this particular case, it could have been attacked in from that side, and Alexhandr just didn't ever account for that possibility, but Ben also never did it anyway. I'm still not even sure if Ben knew that base is set up. He must have some inkling that they're on even bases, or maybe the Zerg has more bases. I still can't believe this place is every night. How is that possible? All right. And maybe that's not even true. I feel like surely he's placed one correctly somewhat recently. Getting an Aquifer on the third gas is not a bad move. Says that he is scared. It's true. He has no tier 2 yet. He's getting his Gorgor Swamp just now. So he's not using his tier 2 for anything, is what I should have said. Alexhandr, that is. I do like the general composition that is being deployed here by Ben. He does need, you know, a couple more, I would say like a couple more units in general to contend with this force. At the very least, he has a Witness heading down. Actually, he can probably smash this force with just the ground army. Solarians are going to come in from the side and pick off this base before it can really get started. Maybe they'll even force some army rotation, which is going to be pretty significant there. He's holding his horses. I'm not that goo. Well, Zerg have goo, and Draconins also have goo, and so do Atreus, technically by extension. Solarians are just flying right over the base. Fuck you, Avaleth. Got him. Absolutely got him. Oh, I kill a drill up on the way out. There you go. And hey, this Spear Tith is going to finish, but it was taking a little while, and it just ends up getting focused down, of course. There's 24 stewards being used right now, so. Now, at the same time, he can, of course, start A-moving because if the Hydras are on the way. This move is going to catch him off guard. I mean, the Witness is here to detect the one Lekizalisk. He can just start attacking the bases. The tier 2 defenses, there's not really like a generalist heavy anti-air defense. Like the Spear Tith is good for bounce attacks, but you need, obviously you can get it focused down by Solarians in particular. This is where you need Vithralisks, right? You got the Gorgor Swamp. You can build some Skither cores. You got so much money. Losing the workers doesn't really matter, but yeah, this is also a big problem too. And if you go for the Vithralisks, you don't have anything to deal with the ground army. And yeah, having this much money in the bank, I mean, both players do. So as the Iral Iris gets tickled, we'll select that to keep track of its HP while we follow the rest of the battle. And yeah, it's not looking too hot. Iral Iris is going down, and that is almost certainly going to be the death knell, considering, yeah, okay, he has the Gorgor Swamp, but as soon as that gets focused down, he's going to have no way to use tier 2 tech, right? Although, admittedly, he almost has enough gas to rebuy it anyway. So he has the bases, but not the ability to spend the money right now. That's clearly where he needs to work. And I think also compositionally, like he's starting to get skits, but the Gorgor Swamp is under attack. So that's going to die before he can actually mutate them into Vithralisks, at which point he's not going to be able to do anything to these Solarians. Of course, there is another one in production, but I don't think there's another one in general. So yeah. Also, I think this is 2 games in a row that some shade of purple or violet or whatever is what Ben had, right? He was purple in the previous match, and now he is... of course, that was his turn, right? Skither cores are out. Again, you're not really going to do too much damage to them. You needed them to be Vithralisks. At least some of them to be Vithralisks. Made some sense, right? But yeah, now he's Japanese Violet. And actually, in the same tone, he went from lemon to beige, Alexhandr, so purple into yellow. Or purple into purple, yellow into yellow. Yellowish, I guess. Holding on for dear life, but I think we can all see that this game is over. So what did we learn about this matchup? Again, Ben taking the W here is maybe not unexpected, considering Alexandr's relative newcomer, his newcomer status, you could say, his greenness. But Ben also could have done a lot of things a little bit on the better side in general. Could have been better Taberski, better to be, better Btyb88. Yeah, there you go. So in his quest to become better Btyb88, we would imagine one of the things he might look to do is recognize the strengths a little bit more, maybe do a little bit better micro versus Lekizalisks in particular, but really he could have ended the game sooner with better macro. And you know, he could have done a storm drop. He had the embassy, he had all the tools. That harassment like that catches players off guard so often that it is almost always worth it to try. Now against the Shambler, against Mystery Meat, they're a little bit more wary, particularly of my tactics where I like to do like Terran drops and stuff. I like to do stuff like that. It ends up working out pretty well. So in that context, you know, we are going to be dealing with, maybe I have to go with the frontal assault instead, or fake out that I'm going to do that, and that ends into mind games. But I would just say, like, before they really know what your playstyle is, mixing in some harassment would definitely be helpful. At the same time, oh my goodness, to me, I think of it like there could have been more, some sort of more worker count in general on the saturation level for Alexandr's bases. But we saw that having money wasn't really his problem. It was spending it. So the opener could have been better for Alexhandr. He could have obviously done less for the static defense, done a little bit more for other things. And the GG is indeed called. Replay will go ahead and conclude. And that concludes our cast over as well. So again, hopefully this was a little bit more educational. We get to imagine Btyb versus Alexhandr. I don't know. You could imagine something like that. And clever names aside, I think we did learn some things, right? We took a look at the resource spending. That's probably the biggest problem. I have that problem too in the mid game, especially if I'm microing at the same time. It sounds counterintuitive, but if you can just practice in the middle of a battle, quickly hitting F2 to go back home, or wherever, put a camera hockey on your production facilities, or put them on a control group. Don't even pan away from the battle. Just go, if your control group, like my control group for town centers for building workers is 5, and then I usually have like 6 for, or 4 or 6 or something like that for military production, my first military production, something like that. If you can do something like that, then 5Q, for, if you're using grid hotkeys, that trains the worker, or QQ, I guess, for, oh no, it would be QQ for the Zerg Dwelleth, right? But, do your worker rotation. Then military. I need military. Okay, 6Q for Maverick. I don't know, something like that. Anything, right? And then set the rally point and then go back to microing. If you can do all that, you can get in that habit of just very quickly. It's so easy for Zerg, too. I mean, maybe not in the quantities that you might want. You might have to do a little bit more like shift left clicking with the larva to deselect as much larva if you want like less hydras or whatever. But if you're keeping on top of your macro like that, even in the middle of battle, that's like the key test. Because if you can do it then, well, you can do it pretty much any time. So just getting in the habit of doing stuff like that, I think is a good move. And yeah, looking at the way that this kind of thing went, the only structure that Ben actually lost is the pylon that he built inside Alexander's base, which kind of tells you the level of proactivity that Alexhandr didn't have or missed out on. He did go across the map at least once, but it wasn't particularly successful. And maybe the only reason he got across the map was because Ben didn't rally the rest of his units down, right? He still had them rallying to his base. So another thing to keep in mind. But that is that. Hopefully it was useful. I'm sure the people who were involved in this cast over will post comments talking about what they learned or just general thoughts. And if you have advice for them, post them in the comments too. Join the Discord server, talk to them about what their play. If you think you can contend with these players, right? This is another thing, is that Greth, of course, with the NHFFA community, specializes in this kind of messaging. The home of the perpetual newbie, as he calls it. There are people who are at your skill level, right? If you are, unless you're like a god at StarCraft, then you're probably above anybody in the community, in which case, please join and show us a couple of things, right? See if we can take some games off you after some improvement. But beyond that, it's like, think about it like this is the home of the perpetual newbie in some ways for CMBW, right? We're maybe not perpetual. Again, Btyb, Alexhandr. Come on, we can do that. But the improvement side is a big thing that we want to stress. And that means starting from wherever you are right now and going up the ladder, right? So, maybe get into a position where you can beat the AI, which actually isn't really that difficult, even though they do have some inalienable advantages, some of which are quite cheap. The general gist of it is you can play CMBW and you can excel at it, or at the very least get better at it with a little bit of practice. So join us for the little bit of practice that you need on the Discord server. And of course, if you like these kind of content, you like Cosmonica Brew War in general, you want to contribute to its development, we got a link in the bottom right-hand corner right next to my face. Oh, it's the other way. Face! Check that out, and I'll see you guys later.